We're at that exciting time of the season where all kinds of new products are starting to come in. We've had the Roland FP30, FP60, FP90X stuff all rolling in. We've had the ES920 from Kawai come in a couple of weeks ago, and now we're looking at our very first ES520. So this sits right in the middle of the ES lineup between ES110 and the ES920. We are going to unbox it. I have never had a look at this instrument before, so this is going to be a first look for me. It's going to be a first look maybe for some of you out there. We're going to have some fun. We're going to talk about the action, we'll listen to it, we'll review its major functions, and obviously we're going to get it out of its box first and get it all set up. So let's get started right away. Looks like we've got a music stand there. Power. This is so key. Really appreciate that even all the way down on the ES110, Kawai ships that with the F10H. So this is a half pedaling, full-sized sustain pedal. This thing, you know, it's like a brick. So we got that working for us. I don't think they use regular Scotch tape. This is like crazy serious Scotch tape. If people use this Scotch tape to wrap Christmas presents, no one would ever get anything open on December 25th. Ooh. So there we have it. The ES520. So we are going to get this mic'd up. We are going to get this lined out, or whatever, on a stand and exploring. So stick with us for just a moment while we do that. Thank you so much for being with us here. Merriam Pianos on YouTube with the brand new Kawai ES520. We've got the stereo line outs. We also are capturing with twin microphones as well. And throughout the review and an accompanying sound sample that we're going to do in a separate video, we'll be telling you when you're hearing just the line out or when you're hearing the stereo speakers on this machine. I think it's really important, and it's something that we've just started doing as a standard practice, is always giving people an example of what's coming out, just raw signal, versus how the speakers are presenting it, because speakers have become such a critical differentiator between these instruments. I mean, speakers for a while were more or less ignored for a lot of years, and it just, you know, people didn't make a big deal of it. If you wanted great sound, you just put on a set of headphones, and otherwise it was more about the wattage versus the quality of the speakers or the enclosure, the design. That's all changed now. For these portables, speakers have become a really big part of the engineering process. So we're capturing that way as well. And of course, we've left the plastic on. We're going to take that off. Little birdie told me somewhere people like seeing that. Actually, it is kind of cool. I find that super, super satisfying. I don't know if anybody's had this experience, but like sometimes I'll come across a piece of electronics I own that's like 2 or 3 years old, and I'll realize that I still have that protective film on it, and it's all scratched up, and like peel it off. It's like you've got a brand new piece of equipment. I get it. I actually really do get where that comes from. So before we get too far into the ES520, I always have a little problem with these like middle children in you know, product lineups. I was always a little bit unsure where the FP60 sat between the FP30 and the FP90 in terms of who the customer would be and when I was recommending that instrument. And the 520, I already can tell is going to present a similar dilemma to me between the ES110 and the ES920. And the reason that I say that is that, relatively speaking, it's not that different in price than the ES920. But the ES920 really delivers quite a bit for the price point. And so what exactly, where does this ES520 fit in terms of value, in terms of musical performance? And even just in the 15 or 20 minutes that I had a chance to set it up and play it between the unboxing and where we are right now, because we cut this on the same day, and so my first impressions really genuinely are being delivered to you virtually in real time. I'm going to just dive in and start talking about some of this stuff. So it's a different tone engine in the 520 versus the 920. So this is the progressive harmonic imaging. Believe that's the same chip that goes into the CN29. It's got the full multi-layer samples of the SK Concert Grand and the EX Concert Grand. Doesn't have the SK5 in there. And it's 192 notes worth of polyphony versus the 256 notes of polyphony that we get on the ES920. And so, but one major similarity between these two instruments is actually the fact that they both have a pair of 20-watt speakers, which is quite beefy for something in this price range, and the fact that it's so relatively light. One of the big changes with the 520 and the 920 is they've shed a lot of that metal framework that encased the instrument before. And Kawai took some flack for this over the last couple weeks. I've been reading some forums, and it really seems to be divided into two camps. Those that agree with Kawai that the weight savings is totally worth it, and the fact that you've got a slightly less durable case in favor of something that's way easier to truck around is a good thing. And then you've got other camp where they want this encased in armor plating, and anything short of that is somehow kind of a sign that Kawai has moved backwards and that they're cheaping out. And I'd have to say I'm definitely part of the first camp. We were talking about sound. Let's get back to sound. So the speakers are quite beefy on this, and we've got the progressive harmonic imaging chip producing some really nice sweet sound. We're used to this chip. This is nothing new for the ES520. So let me just quickly play in its default piano setting. You can hear what it's all about. So that's the SK. I've already tweaked one setting from the default. It's not necessarily a sound setting, but you could think of it as a sound setting. I've switched the tone curve to heavy. When I first sat down at this and set the volume, as I usually do, to about 2/3 to 3/4, I've said it many times before, I find that normally on most digital pianos is the best output, where everything feels balanced, the sense of heaviness and the dynamic range you get. And these speakers, to me, and the weight of the keyboard, it just was way too loud, and just whatever combo you want to call between either too loud or feeling too light. And I didn't have the sense of control that I wanted. straight out of the box. I switched it to heavy, and I haven't done anything to the EQ, and it's immediately more satisfying. Now the action is feeling a little closer to the sense of weight that I would get on the RH3, which is in the 920. This is not that. This is the Compact Hammer Action 2. So it's got the triple sensor, but it doesn't have escapement, and it is just a slightly shorter key stick, and it just doesn't feel like it's weighted quite at the same level as the RH3. So that's helped to balance that out a little bit, because these 20-watt speakers put out a lot of sound. And when you're getting those 20-watt speakers on, say, the KDP-110, which also uses the same action and also has the same wattage, but the speakers are pointed down, you don't have that in-your-face, way too active response, dynamic response. So you don't really have to worry about it. On this one, that's just what I found. So if people are in a store trying this out, people are like, yeah, this, you know, on paper this really sounds good, but you get it home and it's all of a sudden it's just feeling either too light or too active. Our brain kind of tends to conflate those two, elements often. That would be my suggestion, almost right out of the box. If you're a real keys player and you've been on an acoustic or a heavier digital, you're probably going to want to do that right away. The sound selection on here is very similar to what you're going to get on the 920. It's got a lot of the standard Kawai sounds that we know and in most cases love. That's the SK Concert Grand that we've just heard. And the EX, which is a brighter, slightly less colorful, but definitely brighter bias tone. That's the EX. Then we've got Jazz Clean. Or as I sometimes like to call it, the Prohibition Patch. Hayuk, hayuk. That's Warm Grand. Upright Piano, Pop Grand. Modern Piano. Which ironically enough sounds the complete opposite of what I would think of as a modern piano. It's the stereo field just goes, it's almost mono. So I could see a use for that, I just don't know about the name. Rock Piano. Yeah, classic E piano, so now we're into a whole other category. E EP2. Was that not Cosmic Girl? I don't know, some Jamiroquai tune. So we've all heard these many times before. They've got some really nice, drawbar organs and church organs. Oops. And then we've got claves, harps, marimba. I wouldn't say they're anything particularly remarkable in any of those, but they're all quite functional. I think where the ES520 stands out, which is where any of the Kawais stand out in this price range, really are their acoustic piano, those core acoustic piano tones, and maybe some of the E-pianos I think are definitely sweet. A few of them above average, one or two of them really some of my favorite that are out there. In addition to this sound selection, you also have a handy amp simulator and effects, which I think are amongst the easiest of any of the major manufacturers to actually access, manipulate, and get some really interesting, affecting on your tones. Certainly out of Roland, Yamaha, or Kawai, Kawai's amp simulator is simple and it's really effective. It sounds really authentic. And I know that's not something that somebody who's using an acoustic piano sound is going to get a lot of use out of. But for somebody who is using E-piano quite a bit, the amp simulator is going to be... going to really grit up that sound and make it sound nice and analog and nice and vintage. So I like that as well. You've also got very easy access to the effects, and to access either one of those you just press and hold it. The menu pops up after about 2 seconds. Super easy to get to. Same with the reverb, press and hold and you're into the menu. Very, very easy to access. So I like that a lot. The other half of this really gets into the recorder and the rhythms. And they want you, quite obviously, there's this gigantic gaping hole here where they want you to do a bunch of USB recording. You can do MP3 recording, you can do wave recording, and you can do MIDI recording straight onto a USB component or a USB drive, which is super handy. I could see this being quite useful for teachers. I don't think many modern professionals who would be using this would necessarily be doing a ton of recording with that sort of a MIDI setup, but I could definitely see playback being something that would be handy. If you had some backing tracks and you wanted to be playing off of that, that would make it easy to do so. And then you've got your recorder controls right here. This does not have auto accompaniment, but it does have built-in rhythms, and there's quite a selection of rhythms for you to play with. I do, before we move on any further, I do want to mention that the 520, just like I think virtually every other Kawai that's out on the market now, is equipped with the Virtual Technician. Now this is a stripped down version of Virtual Technician, so not all Virtual Technician implementations are created equal. You've got touch curve voicing, damper noise, damper resonance, string resonance, key off effect, fallback noise, hammer delay, top board, decay, minimum touch, temperament, stretch tune, and user key volume, half pedal, soft pedal. So I think this is 5 or 6 parameters short of some of the other ones, and even within those parameters there are fewer settings for you to choose from. For example, the touch curve, you've got heavy, normal, light, or off. I know on a lot of them it's heavy, heavy 2, light, light 2, normal, dynamic, and off. So there's just a little bit less there for you to choose from, and you can also access a lot of those settings from the remote app, which you can connect with Bluetooth. Going to take a quick break, get those specs up on the screen for you, and move right on to action. Thank you so much for being with us for the 520 review. We'll see you in a second. So this has the RHCII, the Responsive Hammer Compact Action 2. I don't know why I can never remember that nomenclature. I guess it's just one of those mental tics that I have. Anyway, RHCII. This is an upgrade from what is in the ES110. That is just the RHC. The RHCII wound up in the KDP110. I believe that was the first release that Kawai had of that action. And basically it just took the RHC, it improved the mechanics slightly, thickened a few of those plastic pieces to give it a bit more shelf life and reduce the chance of clicking down the road, and it added a triple sensor. Did not add escapement. They saved that for the RH3, Responsive Hammer 3, which is just a slightly larger action. The key sticks are longer, the geometry is just a little bit closer to that of a real piano, so you know, you wind up with, yeah, it just feels a little bit better. I think to most people, the RH3 feels pretty good. So the RHCII that's in here, I already made mention of it in the sound recording. Oh, let's get on to an acoustic piano here. Feels really solid. There's literally no sense of clickiness. Oh, and I am going to do this because I do know that there's been more and more asks of people to just listen to the keys without actually any sound on whatsoever. So here's the mechanical sound. Sounds kind of pretty normal to me for mechanical noise. No clicks. There you go. We'll get this volume back up here. So like I said in the very beginning, one of the things I did was I switched the touch curve to heavy, because I do feel like this action and this strength of speaker system and the way they've done the dynamic curve is a little bit of a mismatch in terms of the factory settings. That's easily overcome with just a tiny bit of tweaking. People who don't play on acoustics regularly may not actually experience that for themselves. That might not be something that you find to be you know, something that needs correcting. For me, it was. The surface of the keys that Kawai uses on these, it's the same as on the RH3. They've not gone down the road of trying to visually simulate either ebony or ivory in the same way that, say, Roland or Casio has done. They've gone for the microtexture, and this is something that is more in line with their acoustic approach with like the Neotex keys. So this is a microtexture on the surface of both the black and the white keys. It's slightly porous, so it's designed to absorb a little bit of hand oils. It's got that nice balance of glide between not being too sticky and not being too slippery. Another thing that I've seen pop up on forums and YouTube channels and a few other things And again, I think this is just because so many more people are starting to digest and experience digital pianos, which generally speaking, I think is amazing. It's great for the industry. I also think it's good for the world, more people out there making music. But a lot of people just not familiar with the history of pianos and all that stuff, and they start to notice things like, you know, the key bounces a little bit as this returns. You're going to find a mix between different manufacturers in terms of how much you find that little bounce on return. Here's the thing. The same thing happens on acoustic pianos. You've got acoustic piano manufacturers where there's a tiny little bit of a bounce when it returns. You've got other ones where there's no bounce at all whatsoever. And there is no right or wrong. This is a totally different approach to how they weight it, the geometry of the whole action, which changes your sense of the dynamic resistance of the key. So for people out there trying to sort out action and reading all of this feedback, this isn't directed at any manufacturer or any specific piece of feedback that I've seen, but don't get too freaked about keys when they return bouncing a little bit. I've seen it to a certain degree across all manufacturers, and like I said, that mimics what you actually find on real acoustics as well. So it's just kind of part of the beast. That's it for action. I'm going to move on to one last section. We're going to cover things like the stand and the pedal options and a few of the other functions that this 520 has. Thank you so much for being with us so far. We'll see you in a second. Okay, welcome to the features section. First, this has Bluetooth MIDI as well as Bluetooth audio. That means you can cast to these speakers, you can't cast out. I mentioned this repeatedly, but the reason I bring it up so often is I still hear from people who sadly have gone out and invested in really good Bluetooth headphones and then realize they're not compatible. This is not manufacturer specific. This is actually a problem with the Bluetooth protocol. It just is not great for real-time broadcast. Doesn't work. The latency is just too much. So, but you can broadcast in, not a problem at all. We've got the USB. Now on the 520, you can record standard MIDI files, and Kawai kind of has an internal format that you can do. You can play back audio, but you cannot record audio on the 520. This also is equipped with twin 1/4-inch outputs so that you can easily get this to an amplifier or a PA. It also has both sizes of headphone jacks. This has become a standard feature across virtually all manufacturers. I'm really glad they did it. You don't have to worry about keeping tabs on that stupid little adapter that everybody loses the minute that you open up the headphone package. This also has a lot of your standard features, such as the ability to layer two sounds together. Just like many different manufacturers, it's easy to do. You just press the two buttons down and you get piano and strings together, or whatever the combination you want. You can split the instrument into two, and they also has the lesson mode, so you can have two parallel ranges happening if you have a teacher, or in some cases this is really handy for duet playing as well. This has the USB connection to a computer if you don't want to use the Bluetooth. And last but not least, it's available in two colors, black and white. You can get it with the matching stand. You can get it with matching stand and the triple pedal board, so it kind of looks like a home digital piano. But something that they've added as well for this series, you can get it with a triple floating pedal, so you don't necessarily need to get the matching permanent stand. If, for example, you want triple pedal, but you're going to be using this in a portable situation frequently, so you're going to have a collapsible stand, you still want the three pedals. You can now do that. They've got the floating triple pedal system that you can get as an accessory with it. Thank you so much for watching the 520. I'm going to be quite eager to get this next to the 920 to really try and discern, you know, where this is going to be the right buy versus the 920. Because if you move up $300-400, all of a sudden you have the full USB recorder audio, you have the RH3 with the escapement and the triple sensor, you have the four-way equalizer. So those things right there, to me as a player, are worth the money. Then you've also got onboard rhythm accompaniment, auto rhythm accompaniment as well. There's going to be other people who are like, well, I was actually thinking about the ES110, but the speakers just weren't big enough, and I really wanted to have a much more easily accessible, user-friendly interface. Well, for people like that, and this is already going to be a bit of a stretch, I could see if the EQ doesn't really matter. If you were super happy with how the ES110 already felt, you're good here as well. And maybe you're not ever going to use the rhythms or the audio recording, then the 520 is really just kind of a super duper performance series version of the ES110. So yeah, I guess it has its own lane, and I've enjoyed looking at it. I hope you've enjoyed it too. If it's the first time that you've been to the channel, like we said at the outset, we would really appreciate if you subscribed, especially if you liked the video. We're always coming out with new ones. We'd love for you to be checking those out, commenting, become part of our community of piano appreciators and lovers all around the world. We will be back with more videos before you know it. My name is Stu Harrison. We'll see you soon.